Blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you all for joining us. Joining us now, an old favorite, Congressman John LeBoutelier joining us. Congressman, good to have you back.
Kevin, I'm so happy to always be on with you. You're one of my great privileges is to be on your show. How are you?
I am anxious to hear what you have to say. A lot has happened since we've last had you on, and you don't hold anything back when you're talking about the president.
Well, I try to give my opinion honestly with no personal animus or anything, but I try to analyze everything, and I will happily do so with you right now on anything you want me to talk about.
Well, your thoughts on just the midterms coming up. I know you, as a man who has been in Congress, has been on the Big Fox, has an award-winning podcast, lots of people tuning in. You're in the know, so how do you see the midterms shaping up?
Well, I wrestle with this thing, and I try to look at it and say what I don't know. First of all, the big question that we never know in midterm elections as much as we do in a presidential election. Let me work backwards. In a presidential election, you pretty much know who's going to vote because the same people vote every 4 years in presidential races, and it's a big turnout. Now, the midterms, it's a smaller group usually, and so that's a predictable, and it's a different animal. We Republicans do better in midterms getting our voters out than Democrats do. Democrats' base includes young voters and Latino voters and people of color in general, and they tend not to vote in as high as numbers in midterms as they do presidential. So far this year, every poll indicates a very high level of excitement to vote in the midterms. And if we take the special elections over the last year and a half, in every one of them, even ones that Republicans kept the seat or won, the Democrats' turnout was like up 80%. It was way, way up. And, of course, they did win some seats like Alabama and a congressional seat in Pennsylvania that Republicans had forever. And the Democrats won because they got their voters out more than normal. And that's the question for a week from today. Will the Democratic turnout be as high as it was in the special elections? If it is, I suspect they will win the House of Representatives. I predicted in the Hill, I wrote a column for the Hill last week. I said 25 to 35 seats. They need 23 to take over the House. And I think if you go through them, and you can go to 538 or Real Clear Politics, either one, and they have interactive maps of every district, all 435. And you can go through and you can see which ones are close and vulnerable and all that. And it's a pretty good bet that the Democrats will win the House. The Senate's a different animal. Most of the Senate seats are in Republican states. I did see this morning something that will be dispiriting. Arizona, which is a Republican state, has been all my life, the state of Barry Goldwater, the father of really American conservatism. The Democrat is now at 50% in the latest poll, and Kristen Sinema, and the Republican Martha McSally's at 44%, which mirrors President Trump's approval rating in Arizona. He's got a 44% approval and a 53% disapproval, and the Republican is getting 44, the same number. And Trump is not bothering to go back during his last week of campaigning, which begins tomorrow. He's not going to Arizona. So, in effect, they've written off that seat, and he's going to go elsewhere. But that's just one seat. The odds are the Republicans ought to be able to keep the Senate. Whether they pick up much, I don't know, but they probably will keep it. But the big news would be losing the House, because that changes governing 100%.
Our great friend John LeBoutelier, Congressman LeBoutelier, joining us with Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio on 107.5 FM, 580 AM. By the way, if people want to hook up with you in your podcast, how do they do that?
SoundCloud or iTunes. It's called Revolution, the podcast. And there's a new one virtually every Sunday, and all of them are up there. There's about 90 of them, I think. And they're pretty fun to listen to. I listen to them, and I like it, even though it's me doing it with Arlene Bynum from Toronto. I think they're pretty good. And I should say to your listeners, just to be fair, that I am a Republican. I'm a conservative Republican. Was elected in 1980 with Larry Craig, who had the office next to mine on the third floor of the Cannon House office building in 1981 and 2 and 3. And, you know, we were Reagan Republicans, and I remain a Reagan Republican. I am not a Trump Republican. I think that's an oxymoron. I don't think Trump really is a Republican. And I think many of the positions he's taken and things he's done, frankly, don't fit and won't last either.
You know, I ran into Larry Craig, Senator Craig, at the primary night. He's doing pretty well with his consulting here in Eagle, Idaho. So next time I see him, I'll tell him you said hello.
I've never forgotten what he told me one day. We were sitting around, and he was telling me about campaigning in Idaho. We were comparing what it's like to campaign here in New York, you know. We all have the same amount of people in our districts, and mine were pretty congested in a short, you know, drive from one end to the other. He was telling me that he had an airplane, and he would fly from one event to another. He'd fly himself, and as he's going along, if he had an hour off in between stops and he saw a nice lake to fish in, he would drop down and land in a field, get his fishing gear out, and go fish for 45 minutes, throw it back in a plane, take off, and go to his next stop. And I thought, man, that's the way to live.
Indeed. The magic of the Gem State. Congressman John LeBoutelier joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning here, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's get to the president. He's gotten involved with a lot of feuds lately. You've known him for years from your time both together in New York. Your thoughts on the White House being under siege, and is that the president's fault or is it the media's fault? How do you see it from your perspective?
I think he's created the siege. He didn't have to tick off half the people he's ticked off, and I think he sort of likes the siege. I think this is sort of a chaotic White House, and he likes it. The chief of staff and the former campaign manager getting into almost a fist fight in the hallway outside the Oval Office, and the Secret Service having to break it up. I mean, we never had that. We never had stuff like that in any other White House, and it sort of illustrates the chaos surrounding Trump. Now, look, Trump also speaks for a lot of people, vents their frustrations very effectively. I give him great credit for it. He hears them. He wants to help them. I don't have any doubt about that. It's not that. It's how to help them, how to get things done, how to enact things that will help people. I think that is where he's lacking. And that's with a Republican Congress. They have really together only done one thing, tax cut at the end of last year, which has turned out to be really a more corporate tax cut than an individual tax cut. But it needed to be done, and it was done. But it's not enough. And they didn't do it. They couldn't get health care done. They haven't done anything legislatively about immigration. So there's a lot of problems there that Trump couldn't even get the Republican Congress to work with him and get things done. How the heck's he going to do it with the Democratic House of Representatives if they win? I don't know what he's going to do.
Well, the big fear is you're going to have, your friends, our friends, the usual suspects in charge of the House, and the White House could be under siege with talks of impeachment and everything else.
Yeah, well, we're going to hear all sorts of stuff. I mean, if they win the House, the Democrat, every one of those committees that investigates is going to go all out to investigate everything to do with Trump. Let's leave the impeachment Mueller thing off to the side for a minute. But everything else, his taxes, his hotel, all the things he does to make money while he's president, they're going to look at all that stuff. They're going to look at every cabinet officer who's had trouble, and a lot of them have, using taxpayer money to fly around at taxpayer expense on private jets and helicopters. They're going to go after everything. And then comes Mueller, because at some point, Mueller will wrap this thing up and make a decision on what to do. And if there's a Democratic House of Representatives, whatever Mueller ends up writing up as a report will end up over there. And that will be, it depends. We don't know what'll be in it. If it's serious, remember now, what he's investigating are two things. Number one, did the Russians meddle illegally in the 2016 presidential race? We already have the answer to that. Yes, they've got a couple dozen indictments of GRU officers, oligarchs, and other Russian hackers. They've already proven that. The second half is the explosive half. Was there any conspiracy with people in the Trump campaign, including Trump himself, to solicit help from the Russians, accept help from the Russians, work with the Russians, all of which are felonies? You can't do it. They knew they couldn't do it if they did it. They knew they weren't supposed to do it, which is why they've all lied constantly since the election about their contacts with the Russians. If you remember a year and a half ago, it's almost 2 years ago now, when this issue first started coming up after the election, Trump and all his spokespeople said there were no meetings with any Russians. There were no Russians, no meetings. Here we are a year and a half later. I mean, we have 83, I think, documented meetings between Trump officials in the campaign and Russians. They'd lied about all of them, denied having any of them. Now we know there were meetings all over the place in Washington, in New York, in London, in the Seychelles Islands. I mean, my God, all this stuff went on. And that makes you wonder, what were they hiding? What went on that they're so desperate to hide from the American people? Well, we're going to find out after the election, I think.
You doing okay?
I'm doing very well, yeah.
Always appreciate you, brother.
Yeah.
Congressman LeBoutelier.
Love being up. I love being on with you, Kevin. Let's do it again after the election soon.
Yes, sir. The time always flies. I can just sit here and hear what you have to say for quite some time. Thank you, sir. And by the way, your website, if people want to get a hold of you?
John LeBout, JohnLebout, John LeBout johnlebout.com.
We appreciate you, sir. Thank you, Congressman. Take care.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Talk to you again soon, I hope.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
There you have it, Congressman LeBoutelier, always giving us his perspective, which is different from our perspective, and we welcome all views. We want everybody to be heard at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. By the way, if you missed last night's debate on Channel 7, they have it on their website, but I thought Brad Little did a great job. I thought Paulette Jordan was caustic, and here is where Brad Little brought it home for me.
Your opponent has mentioned decriminalizing marijuana. You have spoken against
the
this.
The solution to our corrections problem is not decriminalization of marijuana, because you can go to the other states and see that it hasn't worked there where they've decriminalized. Go on the streets of Portland. Go on the streets of Seattle. Go on the streets of California. Go on the streets in Denver. You decide whether you want Idaho to look like that.
Well, I mean, it's clear what he said.
And the great thing about this is, and this is my own personal opinion, so let me apologize in advance to desperate Paulette Jordan at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. You could hear the frustration in the lieutenant governor's voice. Paulette Jordan, to me, and I don't know her background, she says she's a business executive. We'll take her at her word. I know Lieutenant Governor Brad Little's background. I know Dr. Alquist's background. I know Congressman Labrador's background. I found her very caustic during this debate. And like I said, I'm probably, our friend Mateo from the radio station down the hall, Tea Party Bob, and myself probably watched this debate last night. Unfortunately, Channel 7 provides a great public service, but not a lot of people tune into these things. And I just found her caustic, and then she starts grilling him, and I'm thinking, well, no, this isn't Paulette Jordan meets the press. This is a debate back and forth. So coming up, you'll hear Paulette Jordan's response, and she's getting desperate because she's for Prop 2. She doesn't know if she's for Prop 1, and she's for pro-legalization of marijuana. Of course, if that were the case, shouldn't she have been that way all along? We'll discuss it next. Your thoughts, your views. Let's be heard together. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
He's opposed, which is fine. He's of the past. We are moving into the future. And in this regard, when you talk about another option, because we are already saying we're not going to invest that $500 million into a new prison system or expanded prison system, what I would like to do is basically support our current body, which you met Representative Ilana Rebel, and she actually presented a great opportunity, and one that even Supreme Court justices or justices here in the state of Idaho had talked affirmatively on, which is to say that let's reduce minimum mandatory sentencing. We have to get back to reforming Idaho state code and our laws to be better for the citizens of Idaho.
Yeah, that was one of the recommendations.
There we have it from last night's debate, but here you have Brad Little saying, just go check out the streets of Portland, go check out the streets of Seattle, and you'll find out why we should not legalize drugs. Now, last night again, thanks to our friends, our news partners at Channel 7, and remember, when you're hearing Channel 7 on the radio, you're listening to KIDO Talk Radio, our official partner, and like I said, we love Channel 7. And last night, this debate got a little heated about the tribes. And to me, it seemed that Paulette Jordan was very defensive.
Where the gaming's taking place in Idaho right today. Go to Plummer. Go to...
Basically, it came down to this. Paulette Jordan was doing her best to try and goad Brad Little into debating the gaming machines. Now, Governor Otter has come out, along with Mrs. Otter, about endorsing Prop 2 and Prop 1. It shows you, and I write about this at KIDOTalkRadio.com, how strong Brad Little is in this campaign. The last campaign for Governor Otter, not needed. Now, Governor Otter did come out in the primaries for Brad Little, but now he's focusing in on Prop 1 and 2 because it's done. Paulette can be mad, she can be angry, she can tell everybody she's available when she's not, and you can come to your own conclusions about her. But the idea that, bringing back gaming machines is not in the best interest of the tribes where you can gamble, it was just amazing last night. She was doing her best to try and trap Brad Little and had the faux anger and outrage. Let's hear some more. By the way, don't be a stranger, 580-5436, 580-KIDO.
You'd be voting on Proposition 1.
Well, I've made it very clear time and time again that I'm voting against while I support the will of the people. But let's be mindful here. I know what my opponent here is about expanding gambling in the state of Idaho. But let's be realistic, because like the Republican mantra is already, let's let the free market operate as a free market. Why are we going to support and prop up a dying industry? There are many other dying industries in this state. Is he going to now stick up for other industries with his friends more so? I mean, this is one particular portion of the industry that he represents. But I'd like to know why this is now an issue and why are we continuing to defend it. Let's get back to the real issues when it comes to Prop 2 and why we need to expand Medicare. I haven't heard one simple response or an honest answer where our current
the monopoly that the sovereign nations have on gaming
well, has
today,
nothing to do with any sovereign nation in the state.
Well, that's where the gaming that exists on the sovereign nation's property is vastly greater.
By the way, he couldn't call him a tribe because she corrected him, said a sovereign nation. Every time he would try and be nice to her, it was, well, the tribes, well, this, well, that. So now Brad Little's reduced to calling them the sovereign nations. And you can gamble, right? Casinos there. And they do spend money on funding the opposition to Prop 1. That's true. But that offended Paulette Jordan.
Whatever is going to take place in the narrow scope.
How do the sovereign nations have to do with expanding
Because that's
gambling?
where the gaming's taking place in Idaho right today. Go to Plummer. Go to Fort Hall.
Well,
go to Lewis.
those tribes have a right to do that if they like.
I'm not questioning.
You ever just know, you're going back and forth and you're wondering, what does this have to do with who's going to really govern the state? Whether you're in favor of the gaming machines, whether you're in favor of the horse racing, she's got nothing. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't see it.
Well, you're using them as a prop to distract people right now.
I'm saying that the monopoly that they have, that a narrow sideboarded issue for the horse racing industry in Idaho, to keep it dynamic in those areas is a fair point.
I think it would be fair if the people decided to vote on Prop 1. But at the same time, they should know what they're voting for and why they vote.
Right. Well, everybody knows what you're voting for. And, proponents of Prop 1, there's still a major question that has to be answered at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, and that's whether or not the thing is constitutional. we went back and forth on this when we had this decision whether or not we were going to save Prop 1 to begin with. Remember where people were saying, oh, it really doesn't matter. It's not constitutional. Here's Representative Andrus.
And I want to read from the Constitution. No activities permitted in subsection 1 shall employ any form of casino gambling, including but not limited to slot machines, or employ any electronic or electromechanical imitation or simulation of any form of casino gambling.
So why is there Prop 1 then? That seems to be game, set, and match. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Traffic and weather together.
Terry Gebert.
Coming up next, he's warming up in the bullpen. Tom Munns, he wants to talk tribes and sovereign nations and the governor's race. Are we ever going to see Tom run for governor? Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning, Kevin.
And to keep it here for election night coverage, we'll be at the Riverside from 8 until it's over. We look forward to that. We're just getting our coverage together. We'll be interviewing all the newsmakers and all the winners, people. We won't be interviewing the Democrats or perhaps even people associated with the IEA. They've targeted Sherry Ibarra. That's interesting. When you think about people working together with the state school superintendent, you've got the teachers union, which actually endorsed Brad Little, and he tried to explain that last night to Paulette Jordan, and she couldn't really comprehend that. You know, my takeaways from the debate, which you can get at Channel 7's website, is that somebody told Paulette Jordan she should run for governor. She read a book on how to run for governor. And she's following every thought and blueprint from the book. And as I'm sitting there watching this, and look, that's huge for a Republican to get the endorsement of the IEA, and it just didn't register with her when Brad Little hit her with that. Well, the teachers didn't. Well, yeah, the teachers make up the IEA. And then you have the IEA going after Sherry Ibarra. That state school superintendent's race is going to be fascinating to watch. We'll see how that plays out, as well as the lieutenant governor's race. We'll keep our eyes on that. Coming up, Tom, hang on. Tom Munns will join us, and you'll get plenty of time, Tom. And certainly we appreciate you. We'll see Tom this Sunday at the Capitol, the Red Tsunami Rally. That begins at 1 o'clock. We hope to see you there. And it'll be a good time, keeping Idaho red. Want to thank Alicia and Representative Zito and others for having us there. Coming up, we will take a look at more of the gubernatorial debate. Fracking became a major issue as well, and also the president making news where he wants to get rid of the 14th Amendment. Should we just move on here, or I understand people are busy, so let's go to the phones and go to TomMunns.com. Hello, Tom. Thanks for your patience.
Good morning, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. You'd mentioned something about sovereign nations, but Maggie O'Meara mentioned something about the Jewish synagogue, and I had found an article from January that talked about an active shooter that simulated that exact thing. So anyway, I just thought I would mention that. So sovereign, my wife and I like to talk about sovereignty, God's sovereignty mostly, national sovereignty, that kind of thing. And sovereignty to me would actually mean full control over in this case, in your nation. And I wonder if it's a bit of a misstatement for Miss Jordan to be able to suggest that she's a sovereign nation when they have reliance on the federal government would mean that the federal government has a certain degree of control over their reservation. I would by no stretch of the imagination suggest that a reservation is anything remotely close to a nation as we understand regular nation states. So I think that she actually misspoke. It was probably it sounded to me a bit more like a politically correct kind of a moment where we need to be able to try to be able to expand our pride momentarily. Now, I have no bad feelings about the Indians at all. As a matter of fact, well, I guess maybe I'm not even supposed to call them that. But when you realize what the Americans did when we ended up putting them in a certain area, and then we said, here, you can live here, and then you can be sovereign. I think it's done nothing more than leave detrimental effects toward those those people. When you go and you talk to law enforcement, like I do in Fort Hall and Pocatello and some of those areas, they talk about the absolute travesty of what life is like on a reservation. So I wanted to be able to.
Well, what do they say about that? What is life like on a reservation?
Well, they say that the crime is pretty high. Most of the crime that they have there is I don't know what color you call them. I guess red against white, maybe, because they feel like the white man is invading their territory. And what they're failing to realize, according to the officer that I talked to, is that the way that capitalism works is if somebody owns something and they decide to sell it, they can sell it to whoever they want, no matter what color they are. And, obviously, intoxication's a big deal. Drugs is a big deal. They've got, some of their own families that are running drugs across the border. And so they've got their own share of problems. And like I said, in no way stretch of the imagination am I talking about them as less of a person. I'm just talking about them as it relates to control and sovereignty.
How do you see this? How do you see this governor's race here?
Well, I've never been a fan of Brad Little. I think that this is probably the perfect storm for a Democrat to come in and take the win. I believe that people are sick of the Republican establishment. I believe the Republican establishment is ignorant to that fact, even though I've tried to mention it to them, at least clearly on the radio, is that the Republicans are going the wrong way. What's interesting is the Democrat Party actually believes that they're going the wrong way, saying in a Facebook page that they've lost their focus, which means at one point they must have had their focus and they had much more respect from the Democrats than they do now. And not that that's a great thing per se, because there's a lot of differences. But, people talk about voting Republican. It's really no different than voting Democrat. I mean, what is going on with this country when we believe that we have to be, there has to be a red wave or there has to be a blue wave? Why is it that we are so against trying to be able to communicate and try to understand what it's like to become an American? We're not even looking at the sources of where this problem comes from. You mentioned that the IEA is supporting Brad Little. Well, that shouldn't be a good thing. That should be a bad thing for the average constitutional citizen, considering what's happening with education and what it's done to our children, turning them into little Marxists. I mean, we've got to start looking at things for what they are. Voting Republican is not a solution, like I had mentioned at the 858 the other day. It's nothing more than the founders had warned us about factions, and it's nothing different than the Democrats voting Democrat. We've got to start becoming an issues electorate, a party electorate.
So, Tom, you believe that Paulette Jordan's going to win?
I believe that she's got style. I believe that like as one of your gentlemen earlier discussed, she's attractive. She speaks in easy to understand bits and pieces. She doesn't stutter like Brad Little does. I don't think Brad knows. I think he thought that this was going to be handed to him a lot easier than it is. And I think that she speaks to the people. She resonates with the people. And to the Liberty people that I know that want to vote for her, which I think is a mistake personally, they're willing to do anything to be able to upset the Republican establishment, hoping that on the backside, with the support, the Republican support or conservative support, that we can begin to start putting in liberty-minded people. See, the Republican Party is not a liberty-minded organization. They hate constitutionalists.
Yeah, I just can't see anybody going with radical Paulette who wants to expand Medicaid, who wants to legalize pot. And if you listen to her, Tom, and look, you've studied, like me, we continue to get better. I don't know what the heck she's saying.
What's really funny is I don't necessarily know what she's saying either, but she's resonating. The sad part, Kevin, is that even though we don't know what she's saying, somebody must be voting for somebody that they don't know what they're saying, which is not uncommon, but the other people act like they do. And this pot issue, this CBD, pot, hemp, whatever, is a huge issue for Liberty people, and they know that under Republican control it'll never happen. So I might go so far as to say that the Republicans could lose simply because of their position on pot.
So without any paid advertising, without any type of support from her own political party, do you believe that Paulette Jordan will beat Brad Little?
All I can say is that it's the perfect storm for a Democrat to win. I'm not saying she's going to win because there's a lot of other things involved. You know, Otter Pack is something that I absolutely have utter disdain for, and the fact that it does nothing but create more of a mob rule scenario to be able to maintain control, undermining the vote of the average American citizen or Idahoan in this case. So I believe that that's actually immoral if it's not unlawful or both. I think that the citizens should be able to cast their votes. I think the votes should matter, and I think factions that collectivist factions should not be allowed to be able to sway the vote. And I think that is really. I'm seeing a lot more Paulette Jordan signs than I am Brad Little. I've seen them for a long time.
I talked about your Facebook post a while ago. Hey, I'll see you Sunday at the rally there at 1 o'clock at the State House.
Yeah, Kevin, good to talk to you. Thanks for having me on.
You're always welcome, Tom. You know, there are certain times to call the sweet spots when you get more time, brother.
Well, I got to find them because I'm running Mach 90 still, so I got to figure out a way to fit in. So if I can't fit in when the entourage is on, I've got to get up earlier.
Thank you, Tom. Take care.
All right, buddy. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Our great friend Tom Munz, TomMunz.com, Facebook and Twitter. Let's go to Hank in Boise. He wants to talk about the big governor's debate. Did you watch the debate last night, Hank?
No, I did not.
Hank, hold on. Where's my bell?
Well, what's that?
I can't believe you didn't watch the big debate last night. Let me just share something. Let me just share something with you right here. This is from last night's debate, whether or not Brad Little is a fracker.
Oil and gas for fracking on the private land that you own. Fracking, of course, has been a controversial practice in other parts of the United States and in Canada.
Paulette Jordan wrote a press release calling Brad Little a fracker. Brad Little says he's not a fracker. This is our friend Melissa Davlin from Idaho Public Television, and Melissa's mom listens to the program. Hello, Melissa's mom.
In Idaho, and we were one of 700 different individuals in 3 or 4 counties where there were exploration.
Hang on, Hank.
They were looking to see if there were any oil and gas resources there. That took place. We don't have any of them now, but they took a big swath to want to see what kind of mineral activity there was there. But in Idaho, because of our geology, we don't frack in Idaho. If you go to where there's the small amount of oil and gas industry that exists over in Payette County, there's no big armada of water trucks going up and down the road like there are in these areas where they do fracking. We don't frack in Idaho. And if we did, I'd be very concerned, because something that's way more important to me than oil and gas is what we do to water. My neighbors, my family, we're all dependent on good, clean water, and that's the most important thing in Idaho.
Representative Jordan, that came directly from the press release that you sent out earlier today. Would you like to respond to Lieutenant Governor Little?
Yes, clearly he's not paying attention to his fellow residents or fellow Idahoans. Our current representative here, my opponent, has once said this before, that it was better for us to open up and expand for hydraulic fracking as a greater resource for the state. Many of your neighbors, in fact, are ones who are in opposition to you in this regard.
Nobody has ever fracked in Idaho.
My opponent actually worked towards releasing 4,000 acres of land to lease to the natural gas company Alta Mesa for drilling.
Would you like to respond to that?
Yes. I mean, but we don't frack in Idaho. I, just like lots and lots of neighbors, they came in and says, let's see what's here. They lease the ground to do exploration. There's no drilling. It's in a very small area. They looked at a great big area, and the oil and gas industry in Idaho is in a very small area right now.
But you were open to exploration on your land.
Yes.
Are you comfortable with that being a responsible use of the land?
As long as the oil and gas development is good for the environment, as long as we're not doing anything to jeopardize our water system. That's the most important thing to me.
Representative Jordan, in his 2014 State of the Union, President Obama.
All right, enough of that. Hank, your thoughts?
Well, there's only a small area. It's the lower reaches of the Payette River as you go towards Payette County. In other words, you have to have sedimentary rock formations for oil. And Idaho's mostly igneous rock. You have very little sedimentary rock. So Idaho's not exactly a prime oil drilling area to begin with. She's not dealing with reality. It's sort of like a dog whistle for her fellow, to get her fellow the environmental extremists out to vote. Although they'll vote Democrat, it's a matter of getting them all excited and getting them out to vote. I think that as far as the legitimate issue it is, and Little would have no reason to be fracking on his land, because most of his turf is in Jim County and the other parts, and there's no evidence that anywhere in his lands that oil is a feasible proposition.
No, I agree, but the whole thing seemed more like a dog whistle last night. Little's out of touch. He wants the no legalization of the dope. Prop 2's good. Prop 1, whatever. To me,
it's dog whistle stuff. It's exactly what I was trying to relate. And I wanted to make another point about Tom Munson on this. A lot of the things I agree with him on, but again, I have problems with this idea that there's no difference in the party. The Democrat Party in its first incarnation is too dangerous to have power, period. That the real battle, the real battle has to be fought in the Republican primary and the Republican nomination system to get more conservatives in. I mean, I share his disappointment with Butch Otter. I mean, Otter's hardly conservative and coming out with Proposition 2, Medicaid expansion, is asking for big trouble down the line because the federal government will not always fund this thing. And Butchie's, and one of my other problems about Butchie baby is that he's increased the dependence on the state on federal revenues to balance the budget. 44% of his income comes from federal grants and federal things. And that takes away from the sovereignty of the state. He's done this more than any other governor. This guy talks a conservative line, but he's hardly conservative in his actions and his dealings. That's been my complaint about Butchie baby all along. But Munson is, in a lot of cases, the John Birch Society is like like Barney Fife. They're like the gang that can't shoot straight. I mean, you have to keep one bullet in the chamber because they don't fight the political battle I think in an intelligent way.
Well, like I said, though, I don't see, and again, we love diversity of opinion here. I don't see Paulette Jordan, after studying her, after the inconsistencies where she says she's open to the media, and even Channel 7 caught her in a fib. And what Walter Minnick learned from his debacle in 2010, there are certain entities that you don't upset the apple cart on. Channel 7 is the biggest. You don't cross Channel 7.
Channel 7 is the bulwark of the Democrat, them and the Idaho Statesman, and these two did more. I mean, those two did more to prop up, let's say, Governor Anderson's career, or earlier on Frank Church's career in the state, and promoting the Democrats. And if you eliminate either one of those two, no Democrat has any chance of any kind of success. I mean, by doing that, she's put the final nail in her coffin.
Great call, Hank. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. KIDO Talk Radio, Kevin Miller in the morning. We've got a lot to talk about today. Governor Otter coming out in favor of Prop 2, the president getting rid of the 14th Amendment, and last night's debate from Channel 7 with Paulette Jordan and Lieutenant Governor Brad Little. First, traffic and weather together.